I'm Bobby Silton, and I'm the Managing Director of the Shared Value Initiative, and welcome to the panel, A Corporate Purpose is Not Enough. So to set some context for all of us, the topic of purpose is trending, and in fact, it has surpassed sustainability as the conversation of the day. It doesn't mean that sustainability isn't important or relevant anymore. It just means that purpose is now the top conversation. We're hearing this from many corners, different stakeholders. So you're hearing it from consumers, hearing it from employees, in particular millennial employees who are looking for more meaning at work. We're hearing it from our communities as greater inequality is occurring. And we're also hearing this from some investors, that corporations need to have a purpose beyond profits. There was an interesting study done a few years ago by the Harvard Business Review Analytic Services, and they surveyed executives around the world. And one of the things that they learned through this survey is that corporate executives actually believe that companies having a purpose beyond profits is really important. But then when you ask them, how is this integrated into your business model and your business practices, only 37% felt that the two were aligned. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to get this alignment to occur. How do we put purpose into practice? And you're going to hear from three leaders today who are going to talk about that and talk about how they can advance societal benefit while advancing business benefit. And they're going to talk about that through a practice called shared value. Now, shared value isn't the only way a company could be purpose-led. And in fact, it's probably insufficient on its own. But we believe that it's the best way for companies to drive social benefit while they drive their business. And you're going to hear more from our leaders about that. So why don't we introduce the panelists? First, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Michael Froman. He was the U.S. Trade Representative during the Obama administration from 2013 to 2017. He is currently the Vice Chair and President of Strategic Growth at MasterCard, and he is a purpose-driven leader, and he's going to bring a perspective both from his public sector background as well as his private sector background. Next, we have Nancy Green. Nancy is the President and CEO of Athleta, and Athleta is the athletic division of Gap Inc. And Nancy has been in this role since 2013, and she recently took her business to being certified as a B Corp, which you'll be hearing more about. Nancy and I are former colleagues, so I know firsthand her authentic leadership and the fact that she is someone who really knows how to drive purpose and profits. And last but not least, we have Mark Kramer. Mark Kramer is the co-founder and managing director of FSG. FSG is a not-for-profit social impact consulting firm. And for full disclosure, the Shared Value Initiative, the initiative I lead, is housed within FSG. Mark is also a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, and he is someone who is pushing the thought leadership in this area of business and society. So, Mark, I'm going to start off with you because we're going to be talking about shared value today, and I know that you've been working for the last 2 decades with a lot of purpose-led companies, along with Michael Porter from Harvard Business School, and the two of you wrote the seminal article, Creating Shared Value, back in 2011. Just to make sure that the audience is clear on what shared value is and how it relates to purpose, why don't you kick us off with that framing?
Sure, thanks, Bobby, and thank you all for being here. It's great to be here. You know, we have this odd notion that somehow social issues and the success of companies are unrelated things. And for a long time, companies have simply thought about their engagement with social issues as being a good corporate citizen, as having a good reputation, as things they did through philanthropy, through CSR, supporting NGOs, and working with government to solve these problems. But the reality is that social problems have tremendous costs for business. If your educational system doesn't work, you can't get good employees. If there isn't sustainable access to natural resources, you can't keep your business going. But it's not only that there are costs to business, there are tremendous opportunities. And more we see businesses developing new business models, new products and services that help to solve some of the largest and most urgent social and environmental problems of the world today. And so Michael Porter and I began this work a decade ago, thinking about how companies can rethink their competitive positioning, their strategies, to incorporate a social impact dimension into their strategy. And so we wrote this article, we called it Creating Shared Value, because it's really creating economic value for the company and its shareholders, and creating social value for the communities in which the company operates. And in brief, we said, there are 3 ways you can do it. You can do it through new products and entering new markets. It could be serving lower income populations. It could be inventing new products that help meet needs. You can do it by rethinking your value chain, the activities your company performs, and your supply chain to think about the welfare and the productivity of your employees. And you can do it by strengthening the communities in which you operate and building stronger economic clusters. So I'll stop there before I get too jargony, but in a nutshell, that's the idea.
And Mark, talk a little bit about how shared value relates to corporate purpose.
Sure. So I think, Bobby, you're absolutely right that purpose is trending now, and lots of people are talking about it. And I saw a report recently by one of the major global consulting firms that talked about the importance of companies having purpose, and they cited Apple as the best example of a company with purpose. That seemed really odd to me. There's no question Apple has vision and lots of things going for it. But when I think about purpose, I think about meeting the needs of society and the world. I think about addressing the problems of people who are not successful, who don't have the opportunities that we have. I think about meeting some of the challenges set by the United Nations in the Sustainable Development Goals. And so our sense of where shared value and having a purpose overlaps is when your purpose is genuinely about helping solve the urgent problems of the world today, and it is built into your business model. That's the shared value part. It's not just separate.
Great, thank you, Mark. Nancy, next one goes to you. So tell us a little bit about Athleta. I'm not sure everyone in the audience knows about Athleta, and also becoming a B Corp. Like, what drove that, and how is that linked to your purpose and your shared value practice?
Happy to. So let me just make sure there's some context set. So Gap Inc. purchased Athleta about 10 years ago. I became CEO and president 6 years ago, and I have a long history with Gap Inc., 27 years. And I've always looked at myself as sort of the entrepreneur inside a very big global company, and I've built and run many different categories and divisions for most of the brands. What I was really excited about was Gap Inc. has always had a very strong values and purpose, but a lot of what we did was really built through the work that we did with our foundation and through CSR and through community volunteering with our employees. And Bobby was a big part of driving a lot of the programs that exist today, which I'll talk about later. But what I thought was really unique was with Athleta, Athleta always had a mission, which was around empowering girls and women through living a very healthy, active lifestyle and building confidence through that. And we believe confidence is key towards empowerment. And so when we talk about healthy and well and confidence, I felt our role was building this company had to come through being confident about how we could solve some of the big issues that we live with today inside our sector. So I'm in the garment business. The garment business creates an enormous amount of waste, high energy consumption, and it is in the top most polluting of industries. We have to solve this. We can't just accept that this is a problem and we're not going to do anything about it. So one of the first and most important things we did is 5 years ago and said, rather than being the part of the problem, it's our responsibility to truly be part of the solution. And so we went after a very, very aggressive sustainability goal with aspiring to 80% of our products by the end of next year will be sustainable. At the time, we were less than 5. And that is one example. So we were starting to put these very aggressive goals out there and figuring out how we were going to really change the way we operated into everything we did, not just having a powerful mission but also changing the entire way we work. And one of the main things we do, obviously, is how we bring product to market. And at the same time, there are also programs that Gap Inc. had started supporting the women. 70% of garment workers are women in the countries that we produce our garments. These women don't come with strong life skill experience. Bobby and the team created a program called PACE, which brings life skill training through an 8-week course on basic needs for these women to learn, whether it's financial, planning, conflict resolution, personal hygiene. And so we look at that very seriously in that we need to be part of the communities, not only where we serve and sell products, but also where we make products. And that's been a very, very successful program. And so we stepped up and said we want to be much more aggressive in being part of that program. So we were already really acting like a B Corp, when we put in place these very ambitious and aggressive goals. And to be quite frank, we really didn't know how we were going to get to all of them. It required a lot of help from third-party consultants. We needed to bring in expertise from other people into the company. I called a couple other CEOs who I knew who were very experienced in thinking about sustainable product innovation to get some advice. And as we were doing this work, we also knew it was very important to tell our story and why this was important. My CFO came to me about 3 years ago and said, hey, I've been reading about B Corp, and I think we're already acting like a B Corp. This would be something that would be really powerful. So what a B Corp is fundamentally supports the idea that people, planet, and profit are not in conflict. That great business and great success can come from doing great in society. And what you do to become a B Corp is you go through a very rigorous and very high standard of certification. And they pull everything apart that you do. How you govern, how you operate, everything, every single thing you do. And you pass levels of certification across multiple dimensions. The reason why we felt it was really important, we also became a benefit corporation. So you can be a B Corp and you can also be a benefit corporation. We actually changed our articles of incorporation to become a benefit corporation, which legally requires us to balance people, profit, and planet, and not just serve shareholders, but to serve all stakeholders, and to have the highest levels of transparency and governance according with that. We felt that was very important, because there's a lot of greenwashing out there. Companies that are saying they're doing things and they're actually not acting that way. So we felt the certification was the proof. And ultimately, as we were building this movement, and the movement has been largely in very, very small companies. We are the largest public apparel company to be a B Corp. Patagonia is the largest private apparel company, and we're about the same size. But we felt it was very important to start to get public companies and larger companies into the movement to really create change and impact. I believe, and we believe, that B Corp certification someday will be what organic certification is to the food industry. B Corp will be that for business. So that's an example of thinking way out, and how do you want to be part of that movement? My responsibility is also to create awareness for what B Corp is. And so we message it very boldly and explain what it is. It's in all of our windows in our stores, it's on our websites, it's in all of our marketing materials. And sharing that story is very important. We also know that every year, customers are more and more interested in aligning, and employees, I'll talk about aligning with brands that support their values. And we're seeing that movement, which is why if you don't start taking this seriously today, you're going to end up with no customers ultimately. And so we knew that was very important. The other thing that's very interesting is we're now entering, so Gen Z, the generation that is graduating from college right now, my youngest daughter is Gen Z, she just graduated in May. This generation cares even more than millennials about joining companies and joining organizations that are very aligned with their values. They are not going to stand for any kind of compromise. And so I look at it also as very important in terms of attracting talent and attracting the next generation of leaders and idea makers. Because we can't run a hierarchical society where all ideas are just driven by the top and pushed down. These ideas on how we're going to improve the environment, society, our businesses have to come from all levels of leadership. And so it's really exciting. So it's also been very powerful as a talent magnet, strategy, which I didn't actually think about until we announced our B Corp certification, and we got a lot of very interested people in wanting to join us. So that's been powerful as well.
That's great, Nancy. Thank you. And I think the accountability piece and transparency is really important of when you're a B Corp, holding those organizations accountable, not just to be able to market the fact that they are, but they have to deliver. So Mike, I'm gonna turn to you. So we have growing inequality in our country, and this financial inclusion has really been a big topic of conversation. We know that the UN Sustainable Development Goals looks at financial inclusion as a big enabler of achieving those objectives. So talk to us a little bit about how financial inclusion factors into MasterCard's company purpose, and how does this purpose come to life in your practice?
So when I was in government, and particularly working on development policy, we talked a lot about public-private partnerships. And mostly that meant we wanted companies to write a check. That was the notion of partnership. And I think the truth is that we cannot achieve the kinds of goals we want to achieve, like the SDGs. There's not enough philanthropy, there's not enough foreign assistance, there's not enough CSR activity to achieve those goals if we don't mobilize the ingenuity and the motivation of the private sector and make it part of the core business. And that's why the work that Mark and Bobby, you guys are doing on shared value is so important, because it gets away from this notion that there's a trade-off between pursuing your core business and doing what's right for society, for communities, for the environment. The reason I joined MasterCard was they'd been on this journey for a long time. 10 years ago, they started on the financial inclusion journey. They created something called the Center for Inclusive Growth that was a leader in terms of thought leadership. And a few years ago, they committed to bring 500 million more individuals and 40 million new micro merchants into the financial system. And we manage that like we manage any other part of our business. Every region, every country has goals, they have programs, they get compensated if they achieve those, they don't get compensated if they don't achieve those. It's a core part of what we do. And it's not that we're going to make much money off of that segment. This is really digitalizing the base of the pyramid. But it's a recognition that we thrive when economies thrive around the world, and we will fail if there are failed states. And that this distinction that whether we're doing this for the shareholder or for other stakeholders, we're doing this for the shareholder. Because for us, if we can demonstrate that we can bring 500 million people into the financial system and get them on a path towards financial security, that is ultimately good for business. It's differentiating for us, to Mark's point about competitive advantage, with our customers, with consumers, with governments around the world, with prospective employees and existing employees. It's incredibly empowering. It's good for business. And we said we're doing well by doing good. We had this debate when I got there. Is it doing well and doing good, or doing well by doing good? And I said the preposition matters. We're doing well because we're engaged in this activity. And just to give you a few examples, we have a global partnership with Gavi, the Global Alliance on Vaccine Innovation. It has nothing to do with payments, but they want to use our technology and our network to help give new babies digital birth certificates, track their vaccination records, receive an SMS message when they're late for a booster. We have a partnership with UNICEF where we help families manage the payment of school fees in developing countries and help governments understand what the economics are. Oftentimes a third of the teachers don't show up to school. So be able to take attendance in a digital way, linking payroll, linking the economics of the education system. We have a partnership with a number of farmer organizations of linking farmers to global markets, let them sell their product directly to market, get a higher price for it, get information, get inputs from their suppliers. We have a partnership with Unilever, where we digitize the relationship between micro merchants and Unilever and a local bank. And when the local bank can finally see the P&L of a little micro merchant, they can begin to offer credit, and that micro merchant can buy more from Unilever. So Unilever's happy, they're selling more to their customers, so the micro merchant's happy, and the bank is happy because it's getting paid, and we're just the ecosystem in the middle. It's not just an issue in developing countries. In the US, there's a tremendous number of issues around financial inclusion, the fact that 30 million people are still unbanked or underbanked. We run the largest social disbursement program called Direct Express for the US government that gets Social Security to people who don't have bank accounts and don't want to give their bank account information to governments. We're working with gig workers to help them manage their finances, get paid more quickly, be able to save, be able to put money away for car maintenance and gasoline or whatever they want to save for if you're an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, to make sure that you have a greater path towards financial security. We're working on portable benefits as well. And I think the key thing is, I mean, it took leadership at the top. Our CEO, Ajay Banga, started this 10 years ago and is really, I think, a leader in this area. But it's deep, deep, deep in the organization. And it's not set aside in some CSR sustainability office. It's in every business and in every geography, so that everybody feels like it's up to them to come up with innovative ways to use our products, our technology, our business models to have this positive effect, because it is good for business. And once you achieve that, and when we start talking to the street about that, we took $500 million of the Trump tax cut and said we're going to put it towards inclusive growth, and created a new philanthropy around that. And that was universally welcomed by the investors. Nobody batted an eye, because they understood this was authentic, it was genuine to the company, and it was ultimately aligned with our business objectives. And when you can explain it like that and be consistent about it, you have a permission structure to really engage in that kind of activity.
And it's great, all the examples you gave, but also the conversation that you had internally at breakfast this morning, talking with Mark. Mark, you had mentioned that one of the biggest challenges is just shifting the context of leaders, and it sounds like that's not a challenge within MasterCard.
No, we've got great leadership in that regard, and we're trying to bring in other CEOs. We have a partnership under the auspices of Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. She's brought together people to focus on financial inclusion, and we're doing partnerships with other CEOs there. To me, I mean, CEOs need a support group to do this, because they all want to do it. They understand, but they all have those quarterly earnings calls they have to do. I think Mark's framework gives the strategic rationale and the justification for doing it, but frankly, they need company. And I think we need more and more CEOs to come to the table and say, we're going to do this together. Larry Fink, I think, opened up again a bit of a conversation with his letter a couple years ago, but now there needs to be a next stage, a turning of the page on this, and say, here's a group of businesses that are really committed to doing this, explaining it to institutional investors of why it makes sense to do, and begin in the same way that ESG was done, I don't know how many years ago now, where it became standard that everybody had to do it. I think this is the next generation of that.
And I'll just build on that and say it really is about the CEO. If the CEO doesn't get it, it doesn't happen in the company. Yeah. And through the work we've done sort of developing case studies of shared value businesses, it's been a real privilege to meet some of these extraordinary CEOs who have come up with entirely new business models. I think of Adrian Gore from South Africa, who developed Discovery Insurance. It's a health and life insurance company. And he worked with behavioral economists, Nobel Prize winning behavioral economists, to develop incentives that lead people to engage in healthier behavior, eat healthier, exercise more, et cetera. And as a result, they have lower medical costs. Their population has a longer life expectancy by about 10 years. And they're a more profitable insurance company. But it really came from the drive that Adrian Gore had to use his business to make people healthier.
That's great. And Mark, just kind of segueing into this whole notion of purpose-led companies, and given that at Harvard you've written a lot of case studies about these companies, what do you think distinguishes them from other companies?
The simplest way I think about purpose is it's thinking beyond a transactional relationship. So you have a transaction with your suppliers, you have a transaction with your employees, you have a transaction with your customers. And a lot of companies stop there. But the companies that have really embraced the idea of purpose think about the welfare of their suppliers, the welfare of their employees, and the welfare of their customers. And they go beyond just giving the customer the product to think about what are the other needs that customers can meet. So I think of Humana, the health insurance company. And they are working in a number of cities in the US on the social determinants of health, on the behaviors and aspects of the community that lead people to often end up with diabetes. And they're thinking not just about selling insurance, but how about they can actually change conditions in communities to reduce the incidence of diabetes. And of course, that has an economic benefit for them as a health insurer as well.
I'd love to just share something that we're doing,
Please.
because you're absolutely right. It's moving from transaction to relationship and welfare. What's good for me is good for you, and shared value. We started an entire business, we started a girls' business because we knew the research was that girls lose their confidence as they start to go through puberty if they drop out of sports. Girls that stay healthy and well and engaged in sports do not have this decline in confidence. And there's lots of research done, it's a fact. They don't dip they dip slightly and they come out and they're much stronger. 70% of female CEOs played sports in high school. I'm one of them. So we're getting that message out that keep your daughters in sports, or keep your mentees that are girls in sports, because it is a fact that you're healthier, you're more active, you build teamwork skills, life skills, collaboration skills, resilience skills. You learn to fail, you learn to pick yourself up and get back out there. So we started an entire business, Athleta Girl, with the idea that we're gonna get the word out on staying in the game and keeping girls in sports. A lot of girls are also spoken to in a way that is not good for their psychology. They're spoken to on how cute they look and how sweet they are. We have to change the narrative and how we speak to young girls to build confidence. So we trained our sales associates not to say, oh, you look so cute in that. We asked them to ask the girls how they felt in the product that they were trying on. And we asked them to share the stories of what they were gonna go do. How do you feel? What are you gonna go do? And that message is really important. We have a series of videos that we created to get that message out, and it's the beginning of really changing the conversation that can start at a very young age. And our business is phenomenally successful, growing at 50% per year in this category as a result of parents wanting their girls to see very, very healthy and positive images of what is possible.
And do you think that would have been possible had you not had this clarity of purpose as an organization?
No, I think we might have launched a girls' business, and it would have just been another extension and in category versus saying we're gonna actually change how we speak to girls.
And inside your organization, what kind of conversations are you having to get to this, to think about equity and inclusion, and it's connected to your purpose?
Yeah, well, one of the things we also are very passionate about is body type diversity. And again, this goes back to confidence in women. So girls, I shared the story on girls. So much in mainstream media and the fashion media and social media is just horrible right now, what it's doing to the confidence of girls and women in terms of this idea of having to attain perfection. So we were first leaders. 5 years ago, we said we are not gonna just show healthy, strong women with six-pack abs that are size 6 and are 24 years old. So in case you've seen any of the things that we've been doing for the last 4 years, we deliberately said we have to show body type diversity, all sizes. We have to show age diversity. We had a 98-year-old, the oldest living yoga teacher in the world. We put on the cover of our catalog 3 years ago. And let me tell you, that was a scary moment, making that decision. There were a lot of people like, you know, what will everybody else think? And I said, we're gonna do it. Actually, my marketing team convinced me to do it. And we did it. And that was a huge breakthrough moment, celebrating that women are not irrelevant once they pass a certain age. And that, right? And this idea of building confidence through celebrating the power of inclusivity, that not everybody should look or act or be in one dimension, that there are so many incredible dimensions of women and sharing those stories. So if we are rebuilding our size inclusivity strategy starting this fall, we'll have a much larger size range of product. And that is just the beginning. And we're also asking women to help us do this. So we're saying, look, we're not perfect right now. This is a journey. Come join us, be part of this community, and help us get better and better. This is something I'm very, very passionate about. Having grown up in the fashion industry, the fashion industry can really create a lot of problems for women's psychology.
That's great. Thank you, Nancy. So we're going to pivot from the societal issue of women body image to, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the digital world. You know, the digital transformation has impacted all of us. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, Mike, is from your vantage point, you have a unique vantage point at MasterCard. Do you think that the digital technology and data are bridging gaps, or are they creating more of a divide in our communities?
Well, I think the advent of the digital economy has the potential to really help us address longstanding issues and longstanding gaps. And the fact that we've seen adoption of cell phones around the world in the speed that we've seen them. It's not complete yet, and not everyone has access to broadband, et cetera, but it's been much faster than I think anybody anticipated. That creates a real opportunity. There are new gaps that have emerged, though, and one of the gaps we're focused on is there's tremendous advances in the private sector when it comes to data science and data science capabilities. And the nonprofit and the government sector, who are dealing with really important societal and economic issues, don't have access to that same degree of data science capability. So we announced a partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation in January to start creating a field around data science for social impact. And how do you get the tools that are available in the private sector available to the folks in the NGO and the government sector? How do you begin to create a generation of technologists and data scientists who see their future in social impact work? Much the same way that the Ford Foundation 50 years ago created the field of law in the public interest. Back then they started creating curricula, internships, career paths, pro bono programs, and suddenly you have a whole generation of lawyers who went to law school to go into public interest and have a whole career path in order to do so. We need to do the same thing with technologists and with data science. Otherwise that gap is going to become widening. So I think the potential's there. Our motto is we want to make the digital economy work for everyone, everywhere, and whether that's people at the very base of the pyramid in Africa who may have a SIM card and they share a non-smartphone, a feature phone with 20 other families in their village, and we can still use that to help get them access to the digital economy, to the networks that will help them be more productive, to gig workers here who are very much dependent on the digital economy, and it's an effective way of delivering better financial security to them.
Great, thank you. All right, I got a sign from the back of the room that we now need to open it up for questions. So someone over here, I think they want you to speak in the mic so they could capture it in the recording.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. My name is Amisha. I'm here with Public Justice, and I wanted to return to some of the comments that Nancy, you were talking about earlier on with this concept of a B corporation. I thought your comment about sort of equating it to an organic certification was interesting for a couple reasons. One being that organic certifications are extremely expensive and not really accessible for a lot of independent farmers. And so I was wondering if anything similar is happening in this arena, but also because when I think of industrial food production, that's one of the most extractive industries. And it's really made markets inaccessible for independent farmers. It pollutes the communities that they go into and have major health implications for both workers and consumers. And so I'm wondering, is it possible to talk about this sort of value setting and corporate good with all industries, or are there ways to shift industries that have no interest in shifting and are sort of inherently hurting communities? So any thoughts from all of you are welcome.
Well, I just learned a lot because my last panel was with the CEO of General Mills, and he did a phenomenal job talking about the work that they're doing with regenerative farming and the agriculture industry. So I'm not an expert on food production, but I do know that food waste is a huge problem, and we can't keep depleting the soils if we are going to cope with the population growth that is facing us. So I do think absolutely this transcends industries. Everybody, every one of us has to figure out the impact that we have. So I talked about the garment industry. The vast majority of our carbon imprint is in the manufacturing side of what we do. And the same for General Mills. He talked about it's in the food production and food waste. So we have to just look at where the biggest impact is that we go after. I mean, the challenge for all of us is we can't solve everything. And so we have to pick and choose the things that we think are the most important to solve and put a lot of resources and energy into that, and innovation. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have is we have to recreate systems. So we're working on the future of this is going to be a closed loop circular economy. Let me tell you, that is years away. The only way we're going to do it is we have to bring together all of the different partners to solve this challenge, because one company can't solve it on their own. And so I think coalitions, ecosystems are more important than ever. Mike and I were talking last night, what can we do together that might be interesting? And so I think we have to get CEOs and leaders and in all parts of industry to come together and share these challenges and figure out what we can learn from each other and truly partner with each other.
And I'll just briefly add, this issue of companies transforming is really tough. And so we've seen a lot of companies where their core product, whether it's food and beverage or others, is not that healthy. And they didn't set out to do something bad, but nobody knew when these products were developed decades ago that they had negative health impacts the way we know today. And so we see companies moving into healthier foods. We see companies actually moving into a new space between food and pharmaceuticals, where they actually are developing nutritional supplements that have health outcomes. But the challenge, of course, is that the CEOs are being held accountable for quarterly results. And as these new businesses and new opportunities evolve, they start out small. And you can't give up your old model and just jump to the new one overnight. And so somehow you have to manage this transition to keep shareholders happy while you shift from a business model that has negative social and environmental consequences to one that has positive. And lots of companies are afraid to do that.
And you have to create proof points along the way.
Sure.
So I view my role running Athleta inside of Gap Inc. We are the proof point, because we are smaller, we're more nimble. We can do this. We're built for the 21st century, not the 20th century. And so companies need those proof points to build confidence and to help accelerate this type of change.
I can speak one. You just said it, Mark. It's quarterly reporting. And we started out this week with a conversation with Larry Fink and Darren Walker, talking about Larry's famous letters from BlackRock on long-term thinking. And my question is, you've mentioned this, that companies who have a mission has to be broader, a social mission broader than the bottom line. But in an environment on Wall Street that forces profitability, could any of you just remark on the profitability of your firms or industry who take on the B Corp, who take on social mission and do the work, that incredible work that you're describing, and deliver the kinds of short-term profits that Wall Street appreciates?
So I'll start. So we're not having a problem with profit at all. It's a virtuous cycle. So again, as I talked about, customers care. And when customers care, they will vote and they will align with your brand. Okay, you care. So, and that is happening more and more and more. And so it is about this, creating this virtuous cycle. PACE, the program that we did with PACE and Fair Trade. The women want to work on our products and it's better quality. You can tell that they care so much. They want to be part of this. So it's about your partners, your customers, your employees, getting better and better ideas, because more and more talent wants to be part of you. You create better and better innovation. So we've seen it as a virtuous cycle. And there are some things that in the short term may cost more, but you find the offsets other places. So we haven't seen it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we work with Fortune every year to come up with a list that they publish in the fall of companies changing the world. And these are really companies with purpose and creating shared value. And we've just been looking at the stock performance, and they outperform the market in the period of time after they're on the list.
That's a really important message to get out.
It is.
Yeah,
it absolutely is.
I think if we're stuck in that paradigm where you're saying we're either going to serve the shareholder or we're going to do the right thing, it's a loser, because we're never going to be able to overcome that. It's got to be that we've aligned this in a way that is ultimately good for the shareholder, because we're investing in the long run, because we're building communities, because we don't have as much churn when it comes to our employees. We have a more loyal employee population, because our customers are flocking to us, because we've demonstrated our commitment to shared value. We've got to bring it into that paradigm, otherwise it's not going to be scalable. You'll have this company and that company, a handful here, a handful there, but to really have the kind of impact we want to have, it's got to be everybody. And that means it's got to be consistent with what drives them.
Question in the back here.
Thank you all for coming. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Alex Reich. I make educational YouTube videos about science and the environment on a YouTube channel called Minute Earth. I have a question for Nancy. So I was looking at your website when you mentioned the amazing work you're doing with respect to body image and body type diversity. And all of the girls are cute, very, very skinny girls, and all of the women have washboard abs. And so I want to challenge you and ask, why am I seeing this and hearing something different from you? And also ask a question, which is part of that, which is, if people want to see cute, emaciated people, and that sells, how do you balance your mission and purpose with the idea of that being a bottom line? So, a two-part question. Thank you.
So go through the whole website. I'd love to go through it with you after, but we have a broad range of photography, social, website, our catalog. And we have a huge range, and we stand behind that range, always. So I'll show you. We'll go deeper, but I'm really proud of the images that we've put out. If you go through our social media feed, if you look at our catalogs, it's very, very broad.
And I'll just say, we've just written a case on Dove's Real Beauty campaign. And Dove Soap has spent vast amounts of money on evidence-based programs with Boy and Girl Scouts, through community-based organizations all over the world, to try and combat the image of women in media and to build self-esteem of women. And they do see it ties to their willingness to engage in athletics, their willingness to apply for jobs, et cetera. It's a deeply meaningful thing. And they have been very successful in their competitive strategy and their branding, and they have had real impact on women's self-image around the world.
Great. Question over here.
Hi, thanks. My name is Amir. I'm a technology lawyer in New York. So my question is for Michael. You talked about making data science tools more broadly available to those that currently don't have the facilities. I guess I'd like to ask a more in-depth question about that. I think in most cases it's actually not the tools, because those are open sourced and generally broadly available, but it's really the data against which you train the algorithms, right? When we read these horrific examples of algorithmic bias that pops up, it's usually it's not the algorithm itself, but it's the data set against which it's being trained. Now, your company is a literal treasure trove of data. So my question is, when you talk about sharing data science tools, are you opening up your data sets to sort of nonprofits and other purpose-driven entities? And are they able to get access to this? I have a lot of sympathy. My corporate clients all view their data as this proprietary thing. Nobody wants to share data with anyone else. But if we're to advance the social mission, I think we have to create a framework by which people can get comfortable, sharing data sets.
So we started several years ago doing what we call data philanthropy, which was to make available various data sets to academics and other institutions for research purposes, all for public purpose. And to be frank, it was very hard because each one had to be negotiated very carefully, and our legal and compliance folks rightfully were very concerned about it. And I'm not sure that is ultimately the scalable model. So I'll give you a more recent example. In the Trump tax bill, there was something, one of the rare bipartisan provisions was something called opportunity zones, which created a very rich incentive for people to invest in distressed areas. We're working with mayors all over the country, and we're building a tool for them so that they can see what the economic activity is within these opportunity zones. And they can compare from one zone to another, from their zones to another city, what happens when you add a retail shop or you extend a transit line. And it's providing both our data insights and the tool, which they currently don't have. They're all excited about it because they've got these investors coming to town and they want to know what's going to have the best impact on the distressed community, not just displaced people who live there now. And using our data and our data tools, we're giving them access to that.
Question here.
This is a question for Michael, but it also involves Nancy. Does MasterCard take into account when someone's a B Corp or something like that? Do you charge them a different rate?
So
Transactions?
It's a good question. No, I don't think we've taken that into account. I mean, we have it's really our acquirers who sign up companies. I'm sure Nancy appreciates that planted question.
Thank you, Denise. I hadn't thought of that.
It's really interesting. In Australia, National Australia Bank, which is a major lender to farmers, has been studying for years whether farmers who are more sustainable in their practices have better economic results. And they found that they have. And they now price differently their loans to farmers that have higher sustainability practices. And it's been a competitive differentiator again. And I suspect you could find something with B Corps that way too.
Yeah. Good question.
Question over here.
Hi, thank you guys. My name is Judy from Compton, California. This question is for Michael. Just thank you so much, Michael and MasterCard, for doing the great things, financial inclusive, that you're doing across the nation. You mentioned a little bit about opportunity zones in distressed communities. And in communities like ours in Compton, entrepreneurship, small business startups, they're creative entrepreneurships, lots of startups that's always looking for startup capital. I'd love to hear a little bit more about maybe the opportunity zones, and also when you mentioned financial inclusive, what would that look like in inner cities across the nation?
Sure. So let me take the second one first. I think there's a lot to be done with either the unbanked, the underbanked, the undocumented folks in inner cities. And we were with the mayor of San Jose last night at a dinner. We're launching a product with San Jose to work with the homeless community. He's got 6,000 homeless people on his streets. And by giving them a card with an ID and the capability of receiving social disbursements, they can get automatic social disbursements from the city and be able to use it and integrate into the local economy. It's something we do in a lot of developing countries, but increasingly it's something we need to do here in the United States. There's a lot of similar sorts of problems. I think on the opportunity zone piece, it's a really interesting area. There's a lot of activity around it. It could end up being a windfall for real estate projects that would otherwise have happened anyway, or it could end up being a very powerful place-based incentive for people to invest in businesses in areas where they otherwise would not have gone. And view our role as trying to help the mayors and the city managers and governors at least have the tools available to be able to channel that investment into the most impactful kinds of investments.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I'm going to pick this gentleman right up here in the front.
I think.
Oh,
Thanks,
it looks like
Kendall.
they gave the mic to some. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't see.
Thank you. Actually, first
Thank you, Kendall.
it's probably a great way to close out. So I'm Jovian Zane. I run an organization called the On Purpose Movement, and we founded the International Day of Purpose. And in all our research and what we see is there's a lot of risk for companies and for leaders to talk more specifically about the way they understand purpose and how they show up with their organization. So I'm curious if you all could reflect on, briefly for us, a time when it was risky business for you to admit what was purposeful in your life and at your time, and how that impacted the way you had to make a critical business decision.
You know, one quick example is that CVS Pharmacy had, a number of years ago, repositioned itself to focus more broadly on health and providing in-store clinics and so on, and Target stores as well as their own. And they decided to eliminate the sale of cigarettes. And they gave up $2 billion in revenue from the sale of cigarettes. And the stock market initially did not like that. But it has actually been to their benefit. Their stock has done better, and because of this strategic choice. And it was a brave choice, but they've also been able to do research and actually found that smoking has diminished in markets where they have a significant presence. So it's actually had a social impact as well as a positive business impact. But it took courage.
You know, I mean, we've had examples where things initially cost a lot more to transition to sustainable materials. So, not all things do, but some do initially. And you know, you're staring at those numbers and saying, what do we do? How are we going to do this with a 10 to 20% increase in cost? And that's where, you know, I was talking about we have to find the offsets someplace else, because if we don't start and say, you know, initially it is going to be 20% more. But as we build the demand and the scale, the price will come down. And as innovation is just getting better and better, we're looking at ways to produce sustainable products with more, you know, efficiency. So those are things in the early days, there are roadblocks everywhere. And then, you know, you also have the naysayers all the time. Why are you doing this? Why is it important? You know, you have to have that conviction and just stay very, very focused on why, and make sure you have the team there working with you to do that.
Mike, bring us home.
I have to say our perspective is a little different. There is another credit card company. It's substantially larger than we are. We won't mention its name. As a result, it has a much greater scale and can price things probably better than we can. So we have to be innovative. And that's led us in a whole variety of areas to develop new businesses, new innovations, and new different ways to differentiate ourselves. And we view our whole commitment to financial inclusion and inclusive growth as one of those ways to differentiate ourselves. So it would have been risky not to do it.
So everyone, let's thank our panel for putting purpose into practice.